Good morning, BG4 family, and happy Sunday. I'm so glad to be joining you guys online this morning. And boy, do we have a treat for you guys this morning. We have such a good message coming from Pastor Elizabeth, some good worship happening this morning, and such a good story this morning that's going to be shared. I'm so excited for you guys that are tuning in with us online. We are meeting in person, but if you so choose to join us online, or if you just can't make it, you're in for just as much of a treat as you would be in person. So we thank you guys for being here. I hope you're having a fantastic Sunday morning so far. So let's hop into some worship and get praying and get our minds and spirits right so that we can get into the Word and continue our series on Joseph. Thank you.
Well, hey everyone, we're going to sing a new song today. It's called Graves and Gardens. When you catch on, why don't you sing along with us? It's pretty fun, so let's sing it together. And I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. In bed's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along and you put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing that's better than you. And I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place where your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing that's better than you. And oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing that's better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. So there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing that's better than you. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who Who am I that the highest king would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. His love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the sun sets free, always free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last he has ransomed me, his grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the sun sets free, always free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Yes, I am who you say I am. Sun sets free, always free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Sets free, always free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I
Welcome back. We hope you guys enjoyed worship. I am so excited for you guys to hear this message from Pastor Elizabeth. But first, we have some family business to take care of. Speaking of family business, we have a church business meeting, a church-wide business meeting for all of our members. Sunday, February 28th at 12:30 here at Church of the Holy Spirit in the sanctuary. It'll be a time where Rick and Elizabeth, our lead pastors, get to share vision for the future and things that happen in the year 2020 and what we expect God to do with BG4 and through BG4. So with that being said, we have a bunch of stuff happening this year alone. And it's only the beginning of 2021, and we have restoration groups launching March 1st. And restoration groups, if you're wondering, it's groups like Mending the Soul, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, and Emotionally Healthy Relationships. I'm so excited for all the people that are in these groups. There's been so many stories of transformation, and you'll get to hear one coming up soon. But there have been so many stories of just people just completely digging deep into their life to find all the crud that has been holding them back from being the best version of themselves. So I hope you guys, if you're interested, can get joined. And all the information is on our website at bgfour.com and /get connected. You can register there and you can find all the times for the groups. We thank you to everyone for their generous hearts who's been giving to BG4. We've been able to do so much, like give to missions, give to disaster relief, give to other things happening around BG4, like the food bank and all that stuff. We're so thankful for you guys' generosity. There are 3 ways to give. If you remember, online, and everything will be up here on the screen. You can text to give, or you can mail it to our P.O. box. But we are so grateful for the generosity of this church, and even people who aren't a part of our church that give. We love you guys. So with that being said, would you guys just prepare your hearts for this message, continuing our series on the story of Joseph. Thank you guys.
Hi there, friends. I'm always honored that you join me to open the Bible, to listen to what God might have to say to us this week. If you're listening and you're from our BG4 congregation, we're so glad you're joining us online. And if you are from somewhere else outside of Battleground or checking out the church, you are welcome and thanks for being here. I'm hoping that you got to do some fun things this week. If you're able to, you could comment. What's the most fun thing you did this week? Did you get to do any outings, or did you get outside at all? Well, we were in Bend for a meeting this week, my husband Rick and I, and the skies were optimistically blue, and Rick Sawchuk wanted to go for a hike. I was game. It felt so good to be outside, even if it was cold. And we thought stopping by Benham Falls, which was a really quick and easy hike a few months ago, would be a great idea. I believe I called it a jaunt. Unfortunately, our little adventure lasted 6 hours and went into the dark and cold of night. We were on a Forest Service road making good progress through the snow, trying to get out from where the falls were when we met an obstacle, an abandoned car in the middle of the only tracks through deep snow. We were 6 miles in with 3 miles to go, and we didn't want to have to reverse all the way out of the area we were in. And so I made the brilliant suggestion, that we try to dig new tracks for the car to go through the high snow and go around this vehicle. So we didn't have shovels, we were kicking and using sticks, and Rick tried to move the car forward into the tracks. And it worked for a minute, but then it got stuck. So he put it in reverse. It was stuck that way too. Yep, you guessed it. You who have greater snow experience know what's going to happen next. It was high-centered with all 4 wheels spinning on the sides, and it was getting colder and darker by the moment. We couldn't move forward because an obstacle was blocking the path, and we couldn't go back because the wheels refused to engage, and they just spun and spun. And I'm wondering if you also have ever found yourself really stuck. Maybe you hit an obstacle in life that keeps you from moving forward and you can't get traction. Maybe you've experienced downward mobility. Things are actually getting worse. They're not getting bigger and better like we Americans so often expect. This year has caught me and many others by surprise. How about you? As a child, I always imagined that things would be just as good and a little better than the life my parents provided. When I imagined jobs and vehicles and family, I never imagined recessions, pandemics, bankruptcy, short sales, or loss. Even our history has encouraged this kind of thinking. Since 1820, the United States has experienced almost continuous improvement in the standard of living for each succeeding generation. There have been depressions, there have been setbacks, and it has not been evenly shared amongst everybody. But overall, things have gotten better, and we've come to expect it. Our GDP per capita is 21 times greater than it was 200 years ago. Life expectancy increased from 40 years to 77 years. The American experience, for many, fueled by the Industrial Revolution, has been onward and upward, and sometimes we're unaware of those who aren't having that same experience. And so, feeling stuck or even downward mobility, it's off script. Facing disease, loss, and uncertainty feels like a skill set that I didn't learn. Genesis 39 tells the middle chapter of Joseph's story. He finds himself stuck. The background of Joseph's journey is his family's story. Isn't the background to all of our stories our family's story? God made a covenant. It was a formal treaty to bless and protect Abraham. Abraham moved his family thousands of miles to the land that God promised to give him. And there God increased his flocks and gave him Isaac. Isaac in turn experienced financial blessing and had 2 sons. His son Jacob is the father of Joseph, the hero of our story. And Jacob experienced even greater financial gains and had 12 sons and many daughters to share it with. It was a story of increasing blessing. Each father explained the importance of staying in Canaan to receive the promise from God. You might remember that Joseph was the favorite son, the heir apparent, who also dreamed that he would rule. What do you think his expectations for the future might have been? He probably expected it to be bigger and better, right? And then all of that increase came to a screeching halt, and Joseph began his downward movement. Last week, Rick talked about how he was sold into slavery, removed from the promised land. And that was bad news. But Joseph somehow kind of lands on his feet and ends up being promoted until he was running a small empire on behalf of his master Potiphar. But then he faces something else, an accusation of sexual assault. And he loses everything he'd gained in a single day and finds himself stuck. Let's look at Genesis 39. Potiphar was furious when he heard his wife's story about how Joseph treated her. So he took Joseph and threw him into prison, where the king's prisoners were held, and there he remained. But the Lord was with Joseph in prison and showed him his faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. The warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. Joseph experiences this downward momentum starting with an accusation. Potiphar's wife wanted to have a sexual liaison with Joseph. He refused her. And ultimately, when she felt really spurned, she accused him of assaulting her. And that accusation specifically challenged Joseph's integrity. How did he handle what Potiphar entrusted to him? He had total access and total trust from Potiphar. Did he use it for his own gain, his own purposes? And on a bigger picture issue, how did he handle God's blessing on his life? Did he try to get what he could out of it? Or did he allow God's blessing to be for a greater purpose? Joseph brought increase and fruitfulness. That's what his name means everywhere that he worked. And he could have thought, man, I just have the raw talent to make myself succeed. But he recognized that that blessing was part of God's promise. It was grace he was experiencing and passing on to others. He didn't fall for his own PR and believe he was entitled to the best of everything. He should take what he could get. He remembered that it was God's grace given for greater purpose. And so he said no to this sexual liaison. But unfortunately, his integrity also created the vulnerability that allowed her to accuse him. He wouldn't just do the expedient thing. And he was accused of mishandling Potiphar's trust. He would have, in that case, not responded to the trust he was given. He would have forgotten that God had entrusted him with influence for his purpose. Joseph hadn't done any of those things, but he didn't get a chance to defend himself. His only hope was that God would ultimately set things right. He experiences demotion. Rick and I have had a couple of situations where we faced a setback at work. A demotion can feel like you're a little kid that's been held back. It can be something that makes you wonder why. Why has this happened to me? Joseph knew that God had promised him leadership and influence, and it must have seemed like life was getting back on the right track as he was quickly promoted in the house of Potiphar, who himself was right-hand man to Pharaoh. His influence in Egypt was rapidly increasing. People around him had to defer to him. Maybe they weren't bowing yet like his dream, but it was like he was moving in the right direction. But this sudden being thrown into the dungeon was totally off script and unexpected. And so Joseph's downward journey continued, literally. The prison was most likely attached to Potiphar's palace because Potiphar was the captain of the guard in charge of Pharaoh's political prisoners. Joseph was thrown into this subterranean space attached to the wall of the palace with other people who had offended Pharaoh and other high officials in Egypt. And here's the problem. They decide what to do with you in their own time. There was no guarantee of a fair trial or a timeline. Joseph couldn't expect that his family would advocate for him because his father thought he was dead. So when that door to the outside world clicked shut, Joseph was forgotten forever. I'm wondering if some of you have experienced hearing a diagnosis from a doctor. Or maybe you've experienced a crisis, and at first so many people were wanting to help, but at some point the silence deepened and you felt like you were alone. Feels like the door shuts, it clicks shut, and you're in this claustrophobic space. And the worst part is that no one can tell you how long you're going to be stuck there or what you can do to change your direction. Joseph experienced that darkness of delay. He experienced painful limits. Slavery must have been a major limit to the favored son of a wealthy family. But Joseph still enjoyed the trust of Potiphar and extensive freedom to move around Egypt. Now he's limited to this subterranean jail. He quickly rose to the top of jail. But can you imagine the disappointment? God promised me leadership, and I never thought I would be the leading prisoner in jail. My life has turned out to be so much smaller and more disappointing than I expected. Limits can feel so surprising and unnatural. The limits of injury and sickness, the limits of finances, the limits of challenge in marriage or with a family member who's struggling with addiction. This isn't how you pictured your life. What's next? What's next is noticing the surprising presence of God. There's a repeated refrain in this passage. The Lord was with Joseph. Genesis 39 opens with the statement, Yahweh was with Joseph. And then again, Yahweh, the Lord, was with Joseph. And at the end of the chapter, when Joseph is at the literal lowest point of his story, the author says it 2 more times. The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with him. He's making clear this is a key to understanding Joseph's story. The whole messy and confusing episode of being accused and thrown in prison is enveloped by the assurance that God is at work right in the mess, because he's not a compartmentalized God. In those days, people believed that gods were active in their region. Egyptian gods were active in Egypt. Assyrian gods were active in Assyria. There were gods of the river and the sky, and they had their own places. Yahweh had appeared to Abraham and to Isaac and Jacob in Canaan. He was the God of Israel. And so Joseph would have expected God to be present in the promised land, in Canaan. He would not have expected him to be at work in Egypt. But in his suffering, he learned a truth that changed the course of history and the way that we're able to know God. It may seem just normal to us, but to the first hearers of this story, it was revolutionary. The Lord was with Joseph in Egypt. The Lord was present where he was not supposed to be. He was bigger than we knew or imagined. He clearly went ahead of Joseph into the house of Potiphar and even to prison to make a path forward and to bring blessing and fruitfulness in the most unexpected places. And we've grown a lot beyond that kind of compartmentalized thinking, right? I don't think so. I think we're still so prone to compartmentalize gods. We meet God at church with church language and songs and church feelings, and then we leave him there. We don't expect him to meet us in our deepest sadness or anger. We don't expect his presence there. In a workplace where the language is bad and the attitudes are bad, we don't expect to meet God. When our home doesn't feel like a home, the last thing we expect is that we're going to meet God there. Yet here's the shocking revelation that still matters to me today. God is there. God's with you right where he's not supposed to be. God can bring success in the wrong place. Joseph knew early on that God had a plan for his life, and I'm sure he imagined how God might use him to lead and bless his family safely in Canaan. And if things stayed on script, Joseph would have been inheriting great wealth from his father. But things go majorly off script. There's a major detour, and Joseph finds himself in a place he never expected to be. And right there, in the wrong place, God's promise that he'd use Joseph, that he'd make him a leader, that he'd bless him and make him a blessing comes to pass. God is God in Egyptian prison. God is writing a story that no one else can see. And there's a final treasure in these verses. God's loving kindness finds me. The Lord was with Joseph in prison, and he showed him his faithful love. That's verse 39:21. God keeps his promise. I'm wondering if your family uses Find My Friends. It's that app. I'm looking for my phone, and I don't have it, but I assume you know what it looks like. It's an app where you can see why your husband is so late coming home from work. Did he stop at the store? It's an app where you can make sure your teenagers are where they told you they're supposed to be. And in our house, part of having a phone and going out is keeping that turned on. It helps you see where your loved ones are and find them when you misplace them. Unfortunately for Joseph, that technology did not exist, and no one was looking for him. I think that would be the most terrifying part of being stuck in prison, that you didn't know how you could get out. No one in the whole world was looking for Joseph, was noticing that he was gone. But even when everyone forgot, God's love was seeking Joseph out. This word, faithful love, is the Hebrew word hesed, one of the most significant words in the Bible. This is only the 3rd time it's been used in the scriptures. It's the word for God keeping promises, not because we deserve it, but because he's strong and faithful and loving towards his children. God gave a promise of blessing to Abraham and his descendants. And Joseph makes the incredible discovery that this promised love, it reaches into the lowest and the darkest places. His love found Joseph in an Egyptian prison. And several hundred years later, King David put it this way: surely your goodness and your unfailing love, your hesed, will pursue me all the days of my life. And 1,000 years later than that, Paul put it this way: who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble or hardship or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. That's Romans 8. God's hesed, his unfailing love, will find you in the dark. You might be forgotten by everyone who knows you, and no one may be noticing what's going on, but you are not forgotten by God. His love is seeking you out. You're blessed to be a blessing. Unbelievably, God still uses Joseph to bless others. The prison warden's thrilled that Joseph is in prison because he makes his life easier. I'm sure the prisoners were thrilled as well, because as one of them, I'm sure he worked for their good. It's amazing the opportunities that God places in front of us when we least expect it, when we feel we have the least to give, and he still makes us a blessing. It's a dear woman in our church who got in touch with me this week. She hasn't been able to make it to church the whole year because of health problems and risks. And yet she wanted to make sure that she could bring in giving. She had been careful to gather the peanut butter and jelly we were gathering last month and the canned meat for this month for the food bank, as well as additional giving. And although she hasn't been able to be part of us in person, she wanted to continue to be part of us in giving. And she's having a difficult year, and yet in the middle of her challenge and her lack, God's given her something to give away, and she's finding joy in that. Sometimes the not knowing can be the worst part. And right in the middle of the not knowing of how long we're going to be stuck is the God who is with us. And that's what I want to leave you with this morning. That truth from Joseph's story. The Lord is with you. He's the God that sticks with us in the dark. Emmanuel. You know, we can look ahead to the end of the story. Turn to chapter 50 and see how God's going to use all this difficult stuff in Joseph's life to ultimately save the lives of many Egyptians and his own family. But Joseph is stuck in chapter 39. He's in the middle of the story, and it's dark, and no one has shared a timeline with him. Maybe you're there right now as well, in the middle of the story, and you can't see the end. Would you say this out loud? The Lord is with me. Would you even say it with your own name? The Lord is with Elizabeth. You who are watching. Right in the middle of the story, in the dark, in the not knowing, he's with you. By the way, Rick and I did get out from being stuck in the snow, but we needed someone stronger. A really special tow truck driver, as well as Elijah, who came and got the kids out of this situation to pull us. We had to wait, but we made it to the other side. Right now, you may be in your own dark and cold waiting, but God is with you. Like Joseph, you carry God's promise, even in a difficult marriage, or with someone in your family or yourself who's sick and waiting for healing. You might be waiting for your kids to return to God, or praying for financial provision, or just waiting for COVID to end to allow your friendships and connections to be what they once were. God is with you, and your story is not over. Our church has a new season coming as well, and if we are willing to let God shape us in the dark, he's going to make us into people that can hold the pain of others. Our community is desperate for those who can listen to their stories and point them to hope, point them to the end of the story. I want you to hear a story this morning as we close from my friend Megan. She's relatively new to the church, and she represents some of the people that have come through our restoration groups this year. And they've found that there are some places they've been stuck in their lives, but God meets them in the dark and they get unstuck and they're moving forward in God's purposes. And I want to invite any of you that God might be calling to join us for emotionally healthy spirituality or emotionally healthy relationships and start that journey. In this next week, their groups are starting the week of March 1st. First, we're going to hear from Megan. I want to pray for you. My friend John Young, who's an elder in this church, had a prophecy this week about how God wanted to meet us in the dark and how he sees how long we've been waiting in this season of pandemic. And he's building patience in us. Patience is what passionately holds on to see what God's about to do. Lord, I pray that you would help us to see that we are in the middle of a story and it's not over yet. I pray you would build passionate patience in us. I pray you'd encourage us through stories like Megan's. And I pray that you would work things for good in your time, for your purposes, as we trust you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Good morning. My name is Megan Etter, and I am here this morning to tell you a little bit about my journey through emotionally healthy spirituality and mending the soul. I went into EHS not really knowing what to expect. I had started my healing journey prior to the group and just thought it would be what I needed to finish out that healing. Little did I know the Lord would open my eyes to things that had been holding me back in different areas of my life. And it was then that I realized that this was not the end of my journey. This was the beginning. Mending the soul would be my next step. And to be honest, it was a little terrifying when I read into it. As a survivor of childhood abuse, I didn't really know if I wanted to go back and dig into that abuse and relive some of that trauma. But I felt the Lord's nudge and knew that it was something that needed to be done. I am so grateful that I did, because not only did I get to know a group of amazing women, but I had an incredible spiritual experience walking through the valley and learning new ways of connecting to the healer. As I revealed my past, I started to feel free from those strongholds that were holding me back. I was able to put a name to some of the abuse that I had just put on a shelf and labeled as normal. So much surfaced for me during this group, and to be honest, it wasn't easy, but we're not promised that in this life. There's a time for everything, and this was my time to heal from my past and to mourn. I get to choose every day whether or not I give it to Jesus and take upon his yoke, or I try to carry it all by myself. And I don't know about you, but the latter doesn't tend to work out well for me. The healing that has happened over the past year has not only affected my marriage in an amazing way, it has been a gift to my friendships, to my family, and it has given me the tools that I will need to help our adopted daughter walk through her trauma once we get her home. This will continue to have a ripple effect in my life. I am so grateful for these books, for BG4, and for the beautiful people who walk through the valley with us. And I highly encourage that if you're feeling that tug on your heart or your soul, that you would take that step forward and grab the Lord's hand and ask him to heal you. I pray that you have an amazing morning. Thank you for listening.